Yo, what's up, everybody? I know you probably like, what the hell, this dude on video? Yeah, this is Anything Goes podcast extra. Sorry about the squeaky chair, but I wanted to talk to you guys tonight. I wanted to have a face-to-face conversation, though. I couldn't do it live. I don't have the YouTube followers to go live yet, and I didn't want to do it on Facebook or Instagram even though it probably would have saved. So I could have done it live, but take this pre-recorded. It's about what 11:30. So it is what it is. It's right after the end of the Chicago Bulls Last Dance documentary. Tonight was episode 9 and 10, and I'm not gonna be in front of you guys long, but the message that I wanted to convey because of this series, I wanted to record tonight. So we're gonna jump right into it. I hope all of y'all are doing well. Tomorrow is back to the hustle and bustle. It's back to the grinds, back to that 9 to 5 until we can definitely get ourselves to a place where we don't have to clock in for anybody. So, I hope your weekend was good. Now it's back to the hustle and bustle. Monday blues. But episode 9 and 10 was tonight. And episode 9 started with Reggie Miller talking about that black cat, Michael Jordan. And, it went back to his rookie year. It didn't start like that. I'm not going to go in chronological order tonight, but it started with his rookie year playing Mike in a preseason game. And he's told this story on like Jimmy Fallon or whatever. And he says, he was cooking Mike at first. The veterans or, just players who've been in the league for a while back then, they didn't really play in preseason games and exhibitions. But Mike played. He wasn't playing hard, probably had no intention on playing hard until Reggie Miller started talking shit to him. Started talking shit to Mike. First half, cooking him. Second half, he scored 2 points. Mike torched him. And Mike talked shit back to him after the game. Don't you ever disrespect Black Jesus. And Reggie said after that, he never called him Michael Jordan again. He would just call him Jordan, Black Cat, Black Jesus or whatever. So they had a rivalry starting back when Reggie got into the league because he wasn't scared of Mike. And that's really and truly what you had to do. Back then, you just had to not be afraid. You couldn't have any type of fear when it came down to playing Michael Jordan because he would use that against you. We've seen that throughout this documentary and throughout his career as a whole. So you had the Bulls going against the Pacers in '93. I remember seeing highlights of this. And this is when Mike and Reggie, they kind of got into a skirmish. So this rivalry was heating up. They played the same position. This guy's on this verge of getting, 3 championships and you have none. You know, you're younger than him. You're in a smaller market than him. You want to be that guy, So he took it to Mike every time they played. This episode 9 and 10, it centers around Chicago versus Indiana in 1998 Eastern Conference Finals and Chicago versus Utah 97-98 NBA Finals. So in the 98 Eastern Conference Finals series, this is one of my all-time favorite playoff series. Maybe my all-time favorite one. That Pacers team was stacked. They were deep. I'm talking about Rick Smits, Antonio Davis, Dale Davis, Chris Mullin, Reggie Miller, Mark Jackson, Travis Best, Jalen Rose. I could probably name that entire roster. That was a team full of veterans and some young players that was coming into their own. Jalen Rose and Travis Best for sure. So, they're going up against the Chicago Bulls. We already know how stacked they are. But this was the team coached by Larry Bird that had the best chance and was the biggest threat to the Bulls, I think, their entire run. I'm talking about from 91 up until 98. This was the team that could beat them. This is the team that could have stopped the dynasty. And they were coached by one of the greatest players to ever play basketball. Not one of the greatest players of his era, but one of the greatest players ever, Larry Bird. So the Bulls went up 2-0. They're playing Indiana. They know how physical Indiana are. And there's no way of getting around that. For real. No way of getting around physicality. It reminded them of playing Detroit. I mean, they weren't as brutal, but, you know, they were physical as hell and they were big. I remember that team. Them Davis boys, they will put you on your ass. You come into the middle, they would. And Mark Jackson, he wasn't a slouch. That dude, he definitely had his ways, his dirty tactics. Jalen Rose came from Michigan. He's a Detroit native. You know they're gonna get down. They go up 2-0. Game 4 of that series, Reggie Miller hits a game winner. I mean, he pushes off Mike. He runs through his chest. They set the play up perfectly. They had learned from earlier that year playing the Bulls that they knew Mike was going to switch on Reggie. Reggie said, look, the ball was coming to me. I knew he was going to switch. I ran into him, pushed him off, got the shot off. I hit it. Jalen Rose says, put the camera on Larry Bird. This is something that Jalen always talks about. And shout out to Jalen Rose because he's indeed one of my favorite people. You know, I love hearing him talk. I would listen to Jalen Rose tell stories every day. So this is something he's been talked about on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast. I think he talked about it on the Vlad TV interview, maybe. But, you know, I've heard him say this shit plenty of times. He's like, Larry Bird wasn't happy, and when they showed him in the documentary, he didn't smile because Reggie hit that game winner. He knew it was enough time. It was 0.4 seconds. I think they added three tenths of a second to the shot clock. I mean to the game clock. And the Bulls got the ball back with 7 tenths of a second left. That's enough to get a shot off. Larry like, hell nah. This is Michael Jordan. Reggie felt the same way. They inbound the ball to Mike, pump fake, get the shot off. It almost goes in, rims out. Series tied at 2-2. They ended up taking the Bulls to Game 7 in 98. And they went up a dozen on the Bulls that game. And then the Avalanche, which is Chicago, led by Michael Jordan and the role players, it happened. For real. Like, they came back, they won the series, they punched their ticket to the 98 NBA Finals to play the Utah Jazz for the second straight year. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back to 97, back to when the Bulls played Utah for the first time in the finals. And we're going to talk about that game. What was it? I want to say it was Game 4, Game 5 of that season. The flu game that year, June 10th. And a lot of people said it was the flu. A lot of people said that it was, he was hungover. Mike was hungover from the night before. But come to find out, he had food poisoning. And Tim Grover, his trainer, he said, you know, I ordered him a pizza. Nothing was open. 5 guys come to the door with the pizza. I felt like it was a bad idea. Mike is the only one that ate the pizza. He wakes up about 2 o'clock in the morning, sick, throwing up, vomiting, you know. But he's like, I'm still playing tomorrow. And Tim Grover, he has been known to say, he's like, Mike, look, if you're going to play, then you need to play the majority of the game, because the minute you rest or for an extended period of time, you're going to be, you know, you're going to be fucked up. You ain't going to be able to go. That game, Mike played 44 minutes and scored 38 points. One of the best games he's ever had. I remember watching that game. Let me drink some apple juice. I remember watching that game as a kid, no lie. And I was mad because I wanted Scottie Pippen to shine that game. I'm like, damn, it'll be dope if Scottie can just win the game for them, you know, because Scottie always got shitted on, man. He did. I always felt like that growing up. He was always like underrated and undervalued. So I wanted him to, really, really take over the game and dominate. But second half, it was all Mike, and he played his ass off. But he showed us how good he was and how great he was and that he would win at any expense. Even his health. We don't know at the time. We're thinking he has the flu, but even with food poisoning, when your stomach's fucked up, you don't want to do nothing because you can't do anything about it. There's no remedy. You just got to let that shit go through your system. So kudos to Mike. They end up winning that finals in '97. Steve Kerr, the role player. When you look at episode 9, they really, really go into how Mike started trusting his guys. He knew they were overachievers, but that's what Mike was. Like, that was his leadership style. I'm going to get the best out of you. And if you remember, he said that about Scott Burrell. He's like, one day you're going to play a big part in what we do. Be ready. And he dropped like 20-something points against the Nets in the '98 playoffs. Same with Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, he was drafted. I think he said he got his big break when he played for the Cavaliers, which ironically his teammate for the Bulls in '98, Ron Harper, he was on that team too. The Cavaliers team in the late '80s and early '90s was really good. Let's just be real. They just ran up against a juggernaut in Chicago. So Steve Kerr talks about watching John Paxson and playing against him, but he said, look, when I wasn't playing him, I was watching him. I was watching him, I was studying him, and I said, that's what I need to be. Did he know he was going to Chicago? I doubt it, but he ended up going to Chicago. John Paxson took him under his wing his last year, and he definitely became that role player, that John Paxson off the bench that he needed, that MJ needed. They had a lot in common. Both of their fathers were killed, and Steve Kerr says, we never talked about it. His dad, Malcolm Kerr, seems like a great man from this documentary. He was in Beirut. He became the president of the American College over there, and unfortunately, he was killed. When you're in foreign countries and you're in the Middle East, especially at that time in the '80s, you're hated. That's just what it is. You're hated now, still. So they killed him. His dad really didn't get to see him reach his full potential. Didn't get to see him go to the NBA. Didn't get to see him win any type of championship. So that was something that was a bond with them, but they never talked about it. But I'm sure it's something that MJ kept in the back of his mind. And of course, Steve Kerr did too. Game 6, it's a hard-fought series between the Jazz and the Bulls. They cooking, of course. The game is going back and forth. And MJ's like, look, the final play is coming. I know they're going to double team me. Be ready. He tells Steve Curtis. And it's funny because Steve is like, you hear me, I'm loud. I'm like, I'll be ready. He was like, I didn't realize that the cameras are there, listening to Mike. They're following Mike around everywhere. They're listening. And I'm here being loud like, okay, I'll take the last shot. They run the play. John Stockton comes over for the double team. Brian Russell, who says that he can stop Mike, he can guard Mike. He says that while Mike is retired, like, why did you leave? Why did you retire? You knew I could bust your ass. You knew I could guard you. You shouldn't have retired. They double team him, they trap him. Mike makes the smart decision, which LeBron would do. So stop hating on him. He passes Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr steps up. hits a two-pointer, they win the game. Well, they make a defensive stop after that. Tony Kukoc dunks the ball. But Steve Kerr pretty much won that game. That's what a team is supposed to do. You know, you have a role on the team. If you are a shooter, that's what your role is, to shoot, to make open shots. I'm going to get you open, make the open shot. They showed a montage of Steve Kerr doing that in Chicago during the 98 season. I mean, this was what he was there for. He was a marksman. He wins the game, goes to the parade, he jokes about it. But I want to rewind a little bit for that series in 97. Mike comes out and he says in the documentary, the added motivation for that series was that Karl Malone had won the MVP that year. Now, this is where, like, earlier in the series, when you think back to Mike and how great he is, the dude always needed, well, not needed, but he always wanted motivation. Even if he had to make it up, he didn't have to make this up. You know, you just come on now. Like, you're the greatest basketball player in the game. And because someone won the MVP that year that you think you're supposed to win it, he held that grudge. Utah only got 2 games off of them. 4 games in 2 years. This is just how much that man wanted to win. So you got Karl Malone winning the MVP. You have Brian Russell saying, look, you know, I can guard you. Mike went into that series seeing red, and they got him. They got him up out of there in 6 games. It was poetic justice. They did some Bulls trivia, and one of them was very interesting. It said that Jordan and Pippen eliminated 760-win teams in the postseason. So when people talk about, you know, the Bulls didn't face any tough competitors, 7 times they eliminated 60-win teams. They went up against great teams. They may not have went up against the caliber of player. Like Mike might not have went up against a contemporary that was on his level, but that's not his fault. That shows us how great he is. You get what I'm saying? So it's not his fault that no one could really match him other than Hakeem. Just speaking of Hakeem, if you remember, when the Rockets went against the Spurs, Hakeem's motivation going into that series was David Robinson was given the MVP award, and I think that was for the 94-95 season. And Hakeem was like, nah. He busted his ass. He embarrassed David Robinson. I think that series cemented Hakeem being the second best player in that era. That Jordan era is Jordan, Hakeem, and Scottie Pippen. I mean, you might put Scottie above Hakeem because he has 6 rings, but when Jordan left, Hakeem stepped up and he became the big dog. But nonetheless, when you look at Chicago, when you look at Michael Jordan in retrospect, you just see greatness all the way around. Talk about how in the 98 series against the Pacers, Mike hung around older guys, his security. He hung around his security. That showed me that Mike was all about gaining wisdom and knowledge. And he says, like, look, I stayed focused with them. They kept me focused. They kept my mind going. They talk about his relationship with Gus, who was a retired police officer. When Mike lost his dad, he looked at Gus like a father figure. Gus would get up out of his bed, go check on Mike if Mike called him crying. Losing a father is losing a parent, period, is horrible. But when a son loses his father, he loses a part of him. Trust me. I know. I lost my dad in 2013. I wish I would have had someone there to, like, step up. I didn't. You know what I'm saying? So I made a lot of mistakes, Mike probably did too, but he had somebody that could like reel him in as well. He gives Gus the game ball after the Game 7 victory against the Pacers. He tells him like, "Look, I need to take you to Utah with me," and that was pretty much episode 9 in a nutshell. He gives him the game ball. You know, Gus is diagnosed with cancer before the Pacers series. So, uh, unfortunately, he does pass away. We see that at the end of the episode. But, I thought that was very, very interesting. MJ surrounded himself with the right people after the gambling shit. Of course, we saw that early in the series, but it seems like he learned and he grew. We get to episode 10. There's not too much to say about it. In the beginning, you're talking about Dennis Rodman being this rock star, which he was. Dennis Rodman is the shit. I walk away from this this series, and I'm like, Dennis Rodman was the man. For 3 years, this dude partied and lived like a rock star. 97, 98, he joins the NWO. Y'all know I'm a WCW fan, wrestling fanatic. So that was, some of my fondest memories was seeing Dennis Rodman and Hollywood Hogan going against DDP and Jay Leno, and Rodman getting involved sometimes on Nitro or at pay-per-views, and some of the dope entrances. If you have time, go on YouTube, type in NWO Chicago entrance. They were in Chicago. Dennis Rodman comes out with them. They pull up in the black limousines. Man, I remember this shit live like it just happened yesterday. They play Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. If you know Hollywood Hogan, that was his theme music. It was Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. One of the greatest entrances in professional wrestling history. Seriously, so go check that out. But we look at we look at episode 10, and this is the swan song. We all know what happened. They beat Indiana in 98, Eastern Conference Finals. They beat the Jazz 97, NBA Finals. Here comes 98, same story. The Bulls didn't lose in the finals. They never went to a Game 7. Scottie Pippen, back is hurt. Game 6, he comes out. He doesn't feel like he can play. He goes back in, and Jordan tells him, he's like, "You're more valuable for us on the court instead of being in the back." Jordan wasn't losing Game 6 with or without Scottie, but Scottie perseverance, defensive plays, scored a little bit more when he came in. It was the icing on the cake. Oh, excuse me. Indigestion is a bitch, everybody. And nervousness. I have nerves. I've never done this before. It was this one time downtown, and we're going to get back to it. You feel me? Shout out to my man, Dwayne Chandler, Dab Media Group. But they win the series. They win in 98. They have, arguably the greatest dynasty ever. MJ, they talk about him pushing off on Brian Russell for the final shot. He didn't. He tapped him, but it wasn't a push off. Like they said, his momentum was carrying him down anyway. So he was going to hit that shot. Mike wasn't missing. They knew this was the end. He didn't want to go to a Game 7. He didn't want to leave anything else up to chance. Hit the game winner. They know they have to make a stop. John Stockton takes a 3. He misses it. It rims out. It was close. And in a nutshell, that's what it is. They talk about Jerry Reinsdorf at the end. They hand Mike a iPad, and they're like, "This is Jerry Reinsdorf's reasoning for breaking up the team." He's like, "Look, they were getting older. It was time to rebuild. I didn't think Mike would want to be a part of a rebuilding process. And they were just, he was giving excuses, and Mike said, no. You know, like, you're looking at contracts and whatever. You could have went to my teammates and they would have all taken 1 year deals. And they would have. Because they would have felt like I would rather go out losing. At least we were defending the championship, opposed to us just dismembering the team, disbanding the team. They ended that team early, in my opinion. You know, just keeping it real. They didn't have to do what they did. They didn't have to blow that team up. The only disgruntled player was Scottie Pippen, and even Mike says it. He's like, if you tell Scottie that you're bringing back me, Phil, and Dennis, he's going to come back, and he would have. They all could have signed 1 year deals. Like Mike said, he was signing 1 year deals at that point in his career anyway. And they would have won. I think they would have won that lockout season. They would have had time to rest, heal up. They would have beat the Knicks in the playoffs, and then they would have beat the Spurs. I think in 2000 they would have lost to the Lakers, and that would have been the swan song. They would have lost at 7. They would have got 7 rings, 4 in a row, two three-peats plus 1, plus a 4-peat, and then lose to the Lakers. If the Lakers had Phil. I think if you would have put maybe Portland in that space, because Portland was coming around that time, San Antonio again, perhaps, because Phil is still with Chicago. I'm not sure if they lose. But I know with Shaq and Kobe coming like they would have definitely took a L, because Shaq was just a different beast. 2000 Shaq to 2003 was just fucking animal. You know, and they didn't have anyone to combat that. They would have had to try to rebuild. But the Lakers, they were coming. They were ready. They were hungry. You know, Jerry Reinsdorf tells Phil, like, look, no matter what was said, you know, after that parade, he wanted Phil back, and Phil was like, I need to take some time off. Like Jordan said, Jerry Krause told Phil Jackson, look, I don't care if you go 82-0, this is it. They didn't have to say that. Like Mike said, you could have nixed that in the bud at the beginning of the season, the 97-98 season. It didn't have to be the way that it was, but they let ego get involved, and ego, unfortunately, ended one of the greatest dynasties of all time's run, maybe 2 years short. We know for sure years short, but maybe 2. They talk about how, you know, and I don't know, I'm confused about this. I need some clarity. I don't know if this happened at the beginning of the season or if it was the end of the season because of the way they said. But Phil got a ritual from his wife where, you know, write stuff down on paper, put it in the can, burn it. So, you know, he wanted, Mike wrote a poem, and the rest of the team, they just wrote stuff down on paper. Mike says, and this is why I don't know, like, when they did it, if it was the beginning of the year or if it was the end of the year. But he says, thanks for the past. Enjoy the moment and make sure we end it right. So I'm thinking this was the beginning of the season. They knew they were going to win the title. Phil told them this was their last dance at the beginning of that season. But those words mean a lot. And they put everything in the can and they burnt it. But thanks for the past. Enjoy the moment and make sure we end it right. That is so poetic. Like, if you have a swan song, that's what you want. And I'm going to wrap it up by saying this tonight, guys. Like, Michael Jordan is regarded as the greatest of all time. This is a two-parter. I'm going to talk about MJ, and I'm going to talk about what I got from the series. He's the greatest of all time because he came into the league at a time where it was dominated by big men. I know people are going to look at Magic and Larry and say, well, they're not big men. Magic Johnson was 6'9". He was a power forward playing point guard. He jumped center. He played center in the finals when Kareem was hurt. Keep that in mind. He was a big guy. Larry was a forward, a small forward. Larry was 6'7", 6'8". He wasn't a small guy. Imagine Larry Bird, and this is how good he was. Imagine him today with a green light, with the three-point shot, what it is. He would be lighting shit up. He was Dirk before Dirk. He opened the door for Dirk and KD and every other player that's like them. That hybrid forward that can just shoot and put the ball on the ground. That was Larry Bird. So, no, they weren't centers, but they were still pretty big. Mike was 6'6". This is why him and Isaiah are looked at the way that they are. Isaiah was small, and he won 2 championships in a league that was dominated by giants. Mike got 2 three-peats as a 6'6" guard. That is unheard of. The fear factor, the respect, defensive player of the year, MVP, scoring champion, 6-time final MVP, 6 NBA finals, all NBA team, all NBA defense, Olympian, the greatest basketball player ever, changed culture, hip-hop culture, made wearing athletic shoes, like personal basketball shoes. He made that cool. He made that fashionable. People probably thought that was a trend, and it wasn't. He became a global icon. He became an ambassador. We have Barack Obama talking about him, President Obama talking about Michael Jordan. You had David Stern talking about Michael Jordan. What Larry Bird and Magic Johnson did for the NBA was great, but what Michael Jordan did, he took it to another level. And the only other player to come after him to match that here was Allen Iverson. Globally, it was Kobe. Kobe was the shit in China. But here it was AI. It's the only player to do that. Now you have LeBron and Steph now, but right after Mike, it was Iverson. So not only was he the man on the court, he was the man off the court. Turned himself into a walking brand, billionaire, sport team owner. He owns the majority owner of the Hornets. You can't say enough about him. Going into this series, I'm like, I'm starting to waver on Mike, even though I watched him. But I'm watching LeBron. But I can say, it's not close anymore. It's MJ all day. That desire, that will to win. And this brings up my final point about this documentary. Greatness comes with major sacrifice, y'all. And everybody won't understand. That's what it is. If you want something bad enough, you're going to sacrifice everything that has nothing to do with it until you get what you desire. If you look at the ending, if you look at that last championship, say we got 6 of them. We got 6, 2 three-peats. Until we give it up, you know what I'm saying? They can't win until we give it up. He knew that. He knew it. He wanted to be the best. He worked hard to be the best, and he became the best. And that's a life lesson. If you pull anything from this series, from this documentary about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, it's that he didn't stop until he became the very best at his craft. He left out on the top, and he didn't want to. Even when he got to the very top, he still wanted more. That hunger for more was real. His dominance over the game was surreal. This dude ate, breathed, sleep, basketball, being the man, being the man. So if there's something that you want to do, if there's something in life that you want to achieve, are you really putting your best foot forward, and are you really putting everything you have into it? If you're not, what are you doing it for? Outwork your competition, and you will get results. You will get the results that you desire and the results that you need. So, look, shout out to the directors, shout out to ESPN, shout out to Netflix, shout out to the players that, let us in behind the scenes of how they really are. This is an eye opener to everybody, but take from this documentary that you need to sacrifice and work hard to get to where you want to be, no matter how old you are. That's just a number. We have an entire life to live. Some people live into 100. So you want to give up on your dreams at 25 and you have 75 more years to go. That's ridiculous. Whatever it is that you want to do, whatever it is that you desire, that you want to be great at, watch this series, this documentary about Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and become everything that you want, and then some. Leave an impact. All right? Y'all have a good night. I'm going to holler at y'all.